All right. Good evening, everybody. Gotta make sure I can see all the comments and stuff. So give me one quick second. All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the very, very last event for this month for October Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. We have had a month full of incredible events, stories, and wisdom, and community and connection. And that's pretty much what the biggest drive was for having a month-long series of events, so that people, the more they hear and the more they see about this topic, we're normalizing the conversation, and we're also shattering the stigma and bringing people together so that they know that they're not alone and that there are other people who have experienced loss. And so tonight, I thought it would be the most appropriate way to wrap up the month's events with hearing stories of hope, people who have experienced loss and have since had the most adorable rainbow babies, because I feel like I can say that. And I really thought that it's always good to bring things back up. And while we give acknowledgement that not everybody gets to have this part be their story, as I know Sarah likes to say, there's more to the story. And I think that that is one of the biggest things that we're driving home for our last event this evening. And just because it's the last event for this theme or this topic and this awareness does not mean that we stop talking about loss and hope, and that is really important. So without further ado, I am so excited and so honored to have two amazing local Marylanders. I would say Baltimoreans, but that's not the case. But we've got Sydney and Sarah, who I'm gonna turn it over to them because they're going to share their story. And yeah, and Sydney, I know before Sarah came on, we were talking about the birth date recently, and so I kind of was hoping that maybe you could start with Jonah's story and share about him and introduce us to Sophia.
Well, Sophia's a little busy downstairs right now, so we'll see
That's
if she
okay.
can make some time. Um, but yeah, so in 2018, I found out I was pregnant with Jonah. Um, it was a really crazy time. There was a lot of uncertainty just about life in general. So his presence, I guess, was just neat, exactly what I needed at that time. And I've always dreamed of having a family, having kids. I worked as a nanny pretty much all my teenage and young adult years. Um, I am a doula, so it was pregnancy, birth, motherhood, all of that was engraved in me at a very young age. And, finding out I was pregnant with Jonah was just felt like my dreams coming true. Um, his pregnancy was, I want to say, rough. Just the morning sickness, because I am a doula and I know what I know, everything just always seemed like I knew too much. And I wish I didn't have all of the knowledge that I did have, because it just created anxiety all the time. But once we got, and I hate when people say, don't tell people you're pregnant until it's safe, because in my case, I was well over the safe mark. Um, so, and I did tell people very early because I was excited. And like I said, it was just something that we needed at the time. So, kind of fast forwarding to 18 weeks and 3 days. Um, we just found out recently that, sorry for that. We just found out recently that his gender, that he was going to be a boy. At first, they actually told us it was going to be a girl. And so I was super excited, and I was about maybe 14 weeks. I started buying girl stuff, started picking out girl names. And so I went to, another appointment, and they're like, oh, this is actually a boy. And so I was so disappointed. And I feel bad now because I had about a 24-hour span where I was really upset that, they gave me all this hope about, him being a girl, and I had all these plans, and it was just completely, to me, it felt like it was just so devastating. But over the next few weeks, I got to terms with it and I started to get excited. Of course, my husband was excited. And like I said, it was 18 weeks and 3 days. And I'll never forget, I just wasn't feeling right. Nothing was really wrong. I just wasn't feeling right. That night, I actually ended up, my water ended up breaking. And at first, and even my husband was like, oh, you just peed on yourself. You just peed on yourself. You just peed on yourself. And I knew that it was more than just peeing on myself. So, of course, I talked to my doctor, and she says, it probably is just pee, just keep an eye on it and, let me know. And I did. I didn't sleep that night. I was up all night. The next morning, I knew that it was my water, that again, something just wasn't right. We ended up going into the hospital, and she checks the ultrasound, and there is pretty much no fluid. That my water did break, and miraculously, he was still alive. He was still moving. His heart was still beating. It was strong. Other than the fluids being, pretty much gone, there was nothing wrong with him. Um, and from there, everything just kind of turns into a blur. I just know there was a lot of crying. There was a lot of just grief. And I remember preparing for this talk, because I have been pretty open about it, but to actually be talking about it again, every time it just feels like I can only describe it as the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. Um, I ended up delivering him. The best thing I did was take pictures, have people take pictures. I know when Chrissy Teigen and John Legend lost their son, they were getting criticized for taking pictures. And that hurt because until you're in it, you don't really know what you're going to do or what you want to do. If this never happened to me, I might have said, does she really want pictures like that, up or posted or even taken? But when people don't realize that's the only thing we have left. That's the only thing. I don't want to say the only thing, but that's one of the only things that we can actually see. And sometimes I'm like, did that really happen? Like, is this all a dream? Did it actually happen? And the pictures, prove like, yeah, it did happen. When people have loved ones that die, they have memories with them. They have things that were, belongings of that person. When you lose a child in utero at such a early gestation, you don't really have memories. The only pictures you really have are sonograms and um, that kind of stuff. So those pictures really did mean a lot. Um, I remember feeling guilty because at my 6-week checkup after delivering him, I asked, like, well, when can I start trying again? What should I be looking out for? What can I do to prevent this happening again? And I love my doctor. She was great. And I really felt like I was in her best care. And she said, we'll just watch you. We'll watch you very closely. We're not sure. It could be this, it could be that, it could be this, it could be that, but we'll just watch you. We'll do all the testing, all of that. So we ended up doing IVF with Sophia because I did have some fertility issues prior to getting pregnant with Jonah. And we weren't sure that I lost him due to the unknown issues that I had prior to getting pregnant. So we decided to do IVF, and thank God it worked on the first try. Super excited. And I said before when I got pregnant with her, I'm not going to tell anybody until at this point, and this and that, had all these plans. And as soon as I took that pregnancy test, I knew that I wasn't going to live in fear, and I wasn't going to live with the fear that I would lose this child too. That's just not the kind of pregnancy I wanted. So I spoke things into existence, and the more I spoke things into existence, those things happened. I remember at 18 weeks, I got a lot of anxiety because that's when I lost Jonah. And they said, everything looks great. I was getting cervical checks every week, I believe, they said, we're going to go ahead and start doing cervical checks every 2 weeks. And I also tell people to just listen to your body. Yes, the doctors know things and they went to school for this stuff, but your body will tell you what you need to do, or what you need to know. And I said, I don't feel comfortable with that. I would really like to start coming. I would like to continue every week. Lo and behold, the next week I go into a cervical check, and when you've gone through something like this, you can read the doctors and technicians' faces very well. And I remember my sister was with me. This was the first appointment that she, decided to go with me. And I was excited. She was happy. And I said, "What's wrong?" And nobody would answer. And I said, "Look, I know something is wrong because your faces are telling me. Just please tell me what's wrong so I can begin to process it." They said, we see that your cervix is starting to open, and we need to send you to the hospital right away. You need to have an emergency surgery. So of course the emotions go up. I'm driving to the same hospital where I just lost, my son less than a year later. We have the surgery. It's perfect. They pretty much caught it just in time. And I'm thankful that I listened to myself, because I don't know if I would have made it another week. The rest of the pregnancy was very high stress. I was always constantly thinking, what's going to happen? Is something happening? I can't tell you how many times I had false alarms and going to the hospital because my anxiety was just out of the roof. Finally, up until the day she was born, once she was out of my body, I felt like I could breathe a little bit. She looked exactly like her brother. And that was hard too, because I felt like I couldn't be happy about this new child because I still had a child that I didn't bring home. So I battled with that for a long time, and I believe that contributed to a lot of my postpartum anxiety. That, I had prenatal anxiety, um, but the postpartum anxiety it just overtook my whole body. Nothing was clean enough. Nothing was safe enough. It actually, it made me cringe to watch people hold her because she was out of my care. And the last thing I could always see was Jonah's lifeless body getting pulled out of the room to go to the morgue. And that's just replayed in my head over and over and over again. And I won't say that it actually subsided until recently. And she's 15 months old. So that just shows that, it doesn't go away. Just because we have other kids after our losses doesn't mean we forget about them. It affects us actually a lot. And the best thing I could tell people or to help them with is to talk to somebody, get a support system, find a therapist, and just having your friends and family. I hate to say it, but it's not enough, because a lot of those people haven't gone through what you've gone through. And it's hard for them to comprehend what you're feeling and how you're feeling and why you're doing the things that you're doing. And I wish I just had these conversations with some people and say, look, I'm still really struggling with A, just having a baby, and B, coming to terms that I'm supposed to having 2 babies versus 1. And I'm really having a hard time, and I just need you to work with me, or I just need some space, or I'm really not feeling visitors right now because Sophia just made a face that looks like Jonah in this picture that I took when he was born sleeping, and things like that. But I did have a lot of support. I did have a lot of help. It was still hard. It was just still hard. So I can only imagine people that don't have that love and support. And yeah, now I have my rainbow baby. She's feisty, she's funny, she's independent. Actually, last night I was watching her sleep, and she was just giggling in her sleep. She just kept giggling, giggling, giggling. And I like to tell myself that that's her playing with her brother, that her brother is joining her in her dreams, and they're really having a good time. I remember when I was pregnant, I actually had a dream of Jonah and Sophia playing together, and we were sitting in the nursery, and they were playing together, and they were having such fun, and they were they knew each other. So I like to tell myself that he is still with us in spirit. Sophia knows him. He knows her, and it doesn't matter how many kids we have after him, that he's still one of our kids. And he's always remembered and he's always loved.
You know, it's beautiful that you mentioned Sophia playing with him, because that is something that I do hear often with people who have rainbow babies, that they will literally say the name of the babies and act as if they are playing. And other people who don't know the story may think that they're like imaginary friends, but they're actually, there's a connection there. And I personally wholeheartedly believe that. So what a gift to be able to have that relationship still flourish and blossom. Thank you so much, Sydney, for sharing your story. And I actually wanted to we're gonna see if this works. We're gonna like
Mhm.
see if I can figure this out. And of course, it's like not showing up. You know, technology, Mercury in retrograde. Okay, all right, we're gonna see something here if it don't work, because
Here it is.
yeah, but now you can see my Facebook page. It's on another thing. Oh, baloney, baloney, baloney. Okay, let me like stop sharing because that's not gonna work. um, but hold on, we're gonna keep talking, and I'm gonna bring this up. And okay, all right. So here we go. Hold on. Almost. Okay, sort of. Okay, hold on. Technology. I'm sorry, folks. I swear it was ready. Okay, here we go. So here is Jonah. And so earlier in the month, we talked quite a bit about Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep, which for those that are watching is a volunteer organization of photographers. We're mostly professional photographers. They do have amateur photographers too that are trained. And what they do is a lot of times the hospitals will make a phone call to the call center for the organization, the local, and if there's somebody that's available, they'll come to the hospital and take family photos. And they are actually, even in a time during COVID, if the hospitals aren't able to have the actual photographer come because of restrictions, some of the photographers are walking through with the staff how to take the pictures so that people can still have these memories as best as possible. So, and I love your tattoo with his little footprints. And then here is, oh, it's not going to do it. Seriously? Oh, technology is not my friend today. You guys, I totally had it like, I'm like hitting the button and it's like not going. Okay. I will share. Don't you worry. I'm going to get this working. It's going to happen. Mercury in retrograde. I'm not letting you win. Okay, so I will turn this over to Sarah, and so that you can share your story about Carson, Lily, and Hunter.
So my journey began back in 2018 as well. And I found out in October of 2018 that we were expecting our first baby. And we were incredibly excited, keeping it a secret from everyone. And one day at work, I just felt like something, like you had said, Sydney, something just wasn't right. So I went to labor and delivery to get checked out. And they said I had a subchorionic hematoma, and that it was what was causing me to have some spotting. But the baby had a heartbeat, and that was reassuring, and to keep an eye on it. The heartbeat was a little low, but they said to stay cautiously optimistic. So I tried. A few days later, I still felt like something wasn't right. So we went back to the hospital, and the hematoma had disappeared. So that was fantastic news. The heartbeat had increased. So they were like, you're in the clear. Everything looks great. See you in 4 weeks. Go home and celebrate Thanksgiving. So we went home, told some close family members. We were about 9.5, almost 10 weeks. And the following Monday after Thanksgiving, I stood up and I felt a gush, and I was like, that's not right. We went to the hospital. They couldn't determine if there was a heartbeat or not. So they said, we'll send you for a better ultrasound the next day. So the next day, of course, going home, all of this anxiety, trying to determine if the baby was still alive or not, went in, and they said, I'm sorry, there's no heartbeat, and gave me my options of what I could do. I could wait, I could take the medicine to induce the miscarriage, or I could have a DNC. And I asked if I could have some time to think about it. So they sent me home. My body decided that it was just going to keep holding on to this pregnancy. So I made the decision to have a DNC. And we went in. Of course, I was full of anxiety. What if they were wrong? What if there was still a heartbeat? So the doctors were really nice and did a reassurance ultrasound just to show me that, yes, I'm sorry, but there was no heartbeat. So I pushed for genetic testing, which of course the hospital says, oh, we don't do genetic testing on first losses. It happens. And I was like, but you can do genetic testing, and you're not going to do this procedure unless you agree to do genetic testing. So after some perseverance, they finally agreed to do a CVS before my DNC, and sent that away for genetic testing. And I had my DNC, went home, started to process my loss. It was probably about a week and a half later, got the results back that it was a girl and that she had had trisomy 16. So there was a chromosomal abnormality that did cause this loss, and the doctors were so confused because they said that it's completely incompatible with life and she should not have ever even had a heartbeat. So I should have never made it to 10 weeks. They said most losses from that happen between 5 and 6 weeks. That's completely incompatible with life, and they have very rarely, if ever, seen a heartbeat. They assured me that it was a completely random fluke and it was very unlikely to occur again, to wait a couple of cycles after my DNC and we could try again. So very apprehensively, we began trying again. We got pregnant again. I was a full ball of anxiety, just like you, Sydney, of not knowing if everything was going to be okay, if everything wasn't going to be okay. So they followed me pretty closely. We hit 8 weeks and they started doing ultrasounds. Everything looked great. We did the non-invasive genetic testing. Everything came back great. They didn't see any trisomies. They did an extended panel. So 12 weeks came along. I was so excited. We had gone to Disney. We took pictures so that after my 12-week ultrasound, we could announce that we were pregnant. And we're in the room. I thought I had read the ultrasound tech pretty well. She kept showing us like, oh, look at this, look at that, look at this. And she left the room. I was all excited. I sent pictures to my parents and everything. And in comes the maternal fetal medicine doctor and my genetic counselor. And the maternal fetal medicine doctor said, we see an omphalocele. It's not good. Here's your genetic counselor, and walks out of the room. And I'm a scientist, so I knew what that was. My husband did not. I instantly burst into tears, and the genetic counselor had to walk us across the hallway to walk us through what she thought could be the cause, what our next steps would be, and what she would do from there. So we went through that it could have been caused by another genetic disorder. She was suspecting something called Beckwith-Witterman syndrome, which is an overgrowth syndrome, and that in order to test for that, it would require either a CVS or an amnio. I was extremely nervous because I knew that both of them came with risks of causing a miscarriage, and she wanted me to go straight across the hall and have the CVS right then, and I was like, no, I am not mentally prepared for this. I need to go home and think about it. And so they told us that, you have until 14 weeks for a CVS, and then you have to wait for an amnio which isn't safe until 16 weeks. So we had another ultrasound at 14 weeks, and it confirmed that he had an omphalocele, which is where all of the intestines are growing outside of the abdomen. So it kind of looked like the umbilical cord, but it was extra large at the base because his intestines were in a sac outside of the stomach. And then I finally gave in and had the amniocentesis done at 16 weeks. Everything appeared to have gone fantastic. I went home, I laid around, I didn't do anything. That was at 9 o'clock in the morning. They had also done a fetal echocardiogram because a lot of the times with these babies, they can have some heart defects as well. So we just wanted to be the most prepared we could be for what we were going to be dealing with. And at about 8 o'clock at night, I stood up and my water broke. And I went to labor and delivery, got in, very similar to Sydney. All of my water was gone. He was still alive and kicking around, and I ended up losing him the next morning. And the genetic testing results did come back that he did have Beckwith-Witterman syndrome, which they once again assured me that the version that he had was a sporadic version. So there can be one that just randomly occurs from bad luck. And there's a version that can be inherited, and his was the sporadic bad luck version. So I was very thankful that it was not inherited. And so once again, they said, oh, bad luck. It really shouldn't happen again. Wait a couple of months and you can try again. So second loss, made it further, knew he was a boy before we lost him, had named him. It was very difficult to process. Wasn't entirely sure if I wanted to try again. And so November hit of the following year, and we decided to try again. I got pregnant again. And at about 5 weeks, I lost it. So I'm on pregnancy number 3 with no live children, and I just didn't know what to do from there. So my doctor that I had been working with since the very first pregnancy is a resident or a fellow, and she is leaving in a couple of months actually. And so she kept saying, you can do this, we can do this, we can figure this out. You have to have your baby before I leave. I have to deliver a live baby for you. She's like, we can do this. So I went and saw a reproductive endocrinologist. They started running a bunch of tests. Come to find out I was pregnant. And so they followed me for the first 10 weeks. We did weekly ultrasounds so that they could monitor everything and to calm my anxiety, because at that point, I was the most anxious person in the entire world because it happened 3 times. Why wouldn't it happen again? And whereas, yes, the first thing that happened didn't happen again. The second thing that happened didn't happen again. And the third thing that happened hadn't happened before. I was like, well, there's more things that can happen. So why won't they? And then starting at 12 weeks, they started doing biweekly cervix checks just because they could not rule out that my water had broken due to the amnio since it had been so many hours later, or that I was experiencing some cervical insufficiency, because by the time I got to the hospital, about 30 minutes after my water broke, I was already 1 centimeter dilated. So they weren't entirely positive that it wasn't already happening and that the amnio may have just sped up the process. And so we went through all of that. And I'm not going to lie, pregnancy after loss is one of the hardest things. Going through the losses is hard, and being pregnant after loss may be even harder. I had a very rough pregnancy. I was very, very sick in the beginning. I ended up in the hospital due to morning sickness and dehydration. And then they started monitoring me for preeclampsia because I think I was so anxious that I started having high blood pressure. And so then I started having some non-stress tests done every 2 weeks and then every week. And at 37 weeks, they did the non-stress test and we failed. So every time I had some Braxton Hicks contractions, my son's heart rate would decelerate. So over to labor and delivery I went, and my doctor came in and said, how do you feel about having a baby today? And I was like, do I have a choice? She said, no. I said, well, then I guess we're having a baby today. So they started my induction, which was going really well at first. They were extremely impressed with how quickly I was moving along until I stalled at about 4 centimeters. Um, and every time they would up the Pitocin, his heart rate would drop. So they would come running in, they stop the Pitocin, roll me all around, try to get his heart rate back up. They'd give us about 15, 20 minutes to recuperate and then start the Pitocin back up again. So the next morning rolls around and I went from, I think it was like a 5 to a 7, and he was down for 4 minutes. And so they came in, stopped everything, and said, one strike, strike 2, you're out, and you're having a C-section. It's like, okay, we can do this. So he looked fine again. I finally got to 10 centimeters. My doctor came in. She's like, okay, it's time to push. I started pushing. She was like, all right, I'm going to go change into my scrubs because you came in a sweatshirt. She goes, just push one more time for me. And she was like, okay, maybe I'm not leaving. So she stayed. I pushed for a little over an hour. And all of a sudden, he was down for 5 minutes and they couldn't get his heart rate back. I had an internal heart rate monitor, an internal contraction monitor. They had broken my water the night before and he was under too much distress. So they had to actually put the water back in, which I did not even know was a thing. And so after 5 minutes down the hallway, we went flying. And we ended up in the same OR that I had lost my son in. So of course, my mind is just racing to the worst case scenario possible, that I was about to have a C-section and have a stillborn because they couldn't get his heart rate back. And the funny part of this story is they didn't have time to start anything but my epidural. So the anesthesiologist came with a toothpick and he poked my shoulder and said, do you feel this? It's sharp. I said, yes. And then he poked my stomach. He says, does it feel the same or different? I said, I think it feels different. And he did it again. And I said, I think it's different. And he goes, okay, cut. And I had a full-on panic attack and started puking my guts out. The good news is I couldn't really feel it. I think it was just in my head. I did not feel a thing. And he was born and he was good. So they said he was just messing with us. Everything was actually fine. They were expecting something to be wrong with the umbilical cord or the placenta, but everything was great. He just didn't like contractions. So he is now 14 weeks old. He's doing great. I had some major postpartum complications. I ended up with postpartum preeclampsia, which I did not know existed until I had it. And ended up back in the hospital for 3 days to get IV magnesium treatment, and came home again, and then ended up with mastitis complicated by sepsis, and ended back in the hospital again for another 3 days to get IV antibiotics. But after that, I'm doing great. So I now have my rainbow baby boy after my 3 losses, and despite everything, I would do it all over again, but maybe not for a very long time. My body needs a break.
I think I figured out how to get it going. Okay, so there's Sophia, Sydney's daughter. There she is celebrating her little big brother. There's Carson. Right, this.
Yes.
Oops, sorry. I thought I took the tattoo picture out. So sorry about that. There's Hunter. They're like the same facial expressions in like both pictures.
Yeah, he was asleep, so it didn't change much throughout until he woke up, and then there was screaming involved.
Of course, but of course. Okay. Well, thank you both so much for sharing your stories, and I greatly appreciate the rawness and the authenticity of that. It is worth celebrating pregnancy after loss, but it is still also really hard, and that people are still validated if these are the things that they experience, like that it is okay and that they're normal in having these feelings, the anxiety and the fear and all of that. Because I think that that's part of the conversation that doesn't always get talked about. I mean, on social media, if you're like on Instagram and in a lot of the groups, like people will talk about those things. But if you're having like actual in-person conversations with people, people tend to want to put on a front that like everything is happy. And then deep down inside, like it's not the case like at all. So let's talk about, okay, since the theme of all of the events is grief, community, and connection. So can we talk a little bit about, did you find community after loss, and how did you navigate that? I mean, I kind of know the answer, but I would like other people to know the answer. But what did that look like for you in building that community, or with finding what that community looked like to help you through your grief, but then also to help you through your pregnancy into having this birth after loss?
I know for me, I was actually in the DMV doulas group, and as I was in the hospital, I remember, and if I'm not mistaken, I think that's how I met Jesse.
Mm-hmm.
But I posted in the group, that I was having this loss and pretty much what to do. And I got messages and such good resources from Jesse and other doulas and midwives in the group. That's actually also how I found Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. My doula best friend, she pretty much got everything together while I was in the hospital. So I didn't even call Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. They just showed up. I had people send me flowers and self-care baskets and give me resources for groups and stuff like that. And I think that played a huge part in my grief process and processing how to get through it. And that was the best community for me, was reaching out to my fellow birth workers that had those resources to give to me.
Were there any specific groups for you, Sydney, that you found were really helpful for you?
So I actually never attended or really talked to be honest. I did some Facebook groups that I'm still in and talk to now, but I'm not sure why. I didn't want to go to a group. I didn't want to sit in a circle and share my story and cry. And, it works for some people, but I know for me at the time, that's not something I was really interested in. But I did seek out a therapist that was specifically specialized in miscarriage and pregnancy loss and stillbirth. So that helped a lot.
That's good. That's good. And I do find that for some people, and I talk to my clients often who have had miscarriages or later pregnancy term losses. Anyway, my words are jumbling. And for some of them, I know like they like would go to a group and then they decided that it was too much, because sometimes going to a group can make it too real, like it's too close for comfort kind of thing, which for some people that's too much. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's like the regular, like I run Pineapple Connections, which is a fertility support group that, some people really like the traditional support group atmosphere, and some people are like, no, I don't want to sit in a circle and do that. But other times people want to just connect with other people who get it, like in a social setting, like, hey, let's go to the park and hang out and be with other people who understand if all of a sudden I start crying, like this is why, like they're not gonna like hound me for answers, they're just gonna be with me as I need them to be. So it's, you gotta take what you feel is sacred for you. So thank you for sharing that. Sarah, how about you?
So for my first loss, I didn't seek anything out, and I also didn't share it with anyone. I just kind of kept it to myself. And then by my second loss, I didn't really know what to do because no one in my family had ever experienced that. None of my friends had ever experienced it, but I remembered a girl on my Facebook page had shared her experience where she had had a stillborn. So I reached out to her and just said, I need help. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to talk to. And she had told me about this group called the Maryland chapter for the Tears of the Tears Foundation. And the Tears Foundation is a group that runs support groups and also helps to lift the financial burden of pregnancy loss if you need help with that. And so I started attending those support groups, and it was very healing to me to be able to be in that group of women who all just get it. There was no explaining my feelings or why I was feeling the way I was feeling. It was, here's how I'm feeling. And they're like, I totally feel the same way. I understand it. Here's what I did. And there were some of them who had already had their rainbow babies. And so they were this beacon of hope for me, and supportive in my pregnancy after loss journey. And I really enjoyed going there. And then that's how I found out about pineapples. And so I came to some of those meetings and met Jesse, and just having that tribe of women who unfortunately have been through it, but fortunately are there for one another. And it's a bond like no other, that I feel. And so I actually became a committee member of the Tears Foundation because I feel so strongly that their work is just fantastic and that nobody should have to go through this alone.
And we're fortunate that we were able to have Jess, the chapter president or chair or whatever her specific role was. Jessica was on Tuesday evening for our organizational event, which was really nice to be able to hear more about that. And I think that that's the piece that I think a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of is the financial burden of having a loss, such as a pregnancy loss, a stillbirth, or an infant loss, that people don't, nobody thinks about that. Like, you know, we think about life insurance for ourselves as adults and when we get older, but we don't think about having like a specific savings in the event of losing a child like that. And I think that the Tears Foundation has definitely become instrumental in being able to help ease and lift some of that burden, and be able to let families focus on other things without stressing about that piece. So um, that's really great. So I'm glad that you found that organization, the group that you felt you needed, and how now you're able to show other people that you can be a beacon of hope for them.
And I also had sought out a therapist that specialized in pregnancy and infant loss and complicated pregnancies when I got my son's diagnosis, because I needed that person to help me walk through the grief and the anxiety of, okay, now what? I don't know what to do now. And I still see her because I just need her.
Yeah, but that's important. And it's, I think that when people often bring up the feeling of isolation going through a pregnancy and infant loss, is they minimize their own mental health well-being and don't necessarily feel, I don't want to use the word adequacy, but that word's been popping up a lot lately with regards to mental health and pregnancy loss. And so I feel that we need to make sure that people know that that is a resource that they are worthy of having, and that it is absolutely necessary to have that support, regardless if you are attempting to get pregnant or not, that it is still an important piece to the healing process of grief, for sure. Do you guys want to add anything to that?
I agree 1,000%. And I wish I would have stuck with therapy and really just stayed on top of it, because I do feel like my postpartum period would have been a little easier and I would have been able to communicate my emotions a little better. Even in pregnancy, the anxiety wouldn't have went away, but I probably would have been able to deal with it a little better.
Yeah, I'm so glad that I did stick with it, because all of those anxieties that I did have during my pregnancy, she was able to help me work through and see that like my anxiety was all very valid given what I had been through, but here's how we can rein it back into control so that it doesn't consume my life.
Yeah.
And the pregnancy, and then even the postpartum period with everything that I had gone through, having her to help me see the light was very useful. Um, to heal in all aspects of, okay, this happened, but here's how we handle it.
Yeah, yeah. And those are all the things that earlier in the month, one of the first panel events we had was on mental health. And we had Maryland based therapists talk about that, and that being part of the way that they can support people. Shall they choose to, you know, try to conceive again and get pregnant? And I think the biggest thing is just being able to have access to the coping skills so that you aren't necessarily missing out on your pregnancy. I mean, it's hard. I mean, a lot of people do disconnect during their pregnancies because of everything that both of you are saying. But by having those extra tools, it gives you a little bit of something, some way to just kind of bring yourself back into your body, and so that you're not necessarily missing out on everything, because that's oftentimes the regret that we hear a lot about is people wish that they had connected more, but they disassociated because it was a safety mechanism, right? Because you don't know. But that's what therapists are there for. They're great people. And if you're watching this and you are in Maryland and you are seeking, or if you're in the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia area, and you are watching this and you are in need of a mental health provider, please reach out. I have a very lengthy list, but I keep it tight because I want to make sure you're getting the best of the best. And we'll definitely make sure that we get you connected with a provider that's right for you. Um, are there any words of encouragement that you both want people, anybody who's watching, what if they're going through some loss and maybe they are currently pregnant again, or maybe they're trying to get pregnant, or they're thinking about getting pregnant again? What words of wisdom or encouragement or solidarity would you like to offer them?
I think for me, even when I kept saying, like, that's it, I'm done, I don't want to try again, I can't try again, I don't have the strength to try again, that strength is always there, even if you don't realize it at the moment. And it's hard, but the end reward is so amazing that it makes all the hurt and the anxiety and the grief a little bit easier to handle in the end. I mean, I'll never get over my losses, and I'll always grieve the loss of my children. Um, but I can celebrate their lives by continuing to move forward and celebrating the life of my son here, and helping others is a good way for me to also parent my children that aren't here.
And I know for me, a lot of people kept saying, oh, just take one day at a time, just take one day at a time, until I realized that it's really taking 1 minute at a time, because the days, months, even really a year after, the days just felt like too long. And if I was feeling sad in the morning, what are you telling me? I have to go a whole day feeling this way? So I really started telling myself, taking it 1 minute at a time. This minute I'm sad, but in 10 minutes I can be okay. And it's okay to take 1 minute at a time. It's okay to feel sad one day and completely happy the next. You just have to keep going. The best thing is to just keep going, and to, like Sarah said, celebrating your angel's life, and also just being appreciative of our rainbow's life. That I can't wait for Sophia to actually understand everything I went through to have her, and just how thankful I am to have her.
Always the best part of the story is being able to share the legacy and to keep that memory going, for sure, for sure. So Sarah, we want to do a giveaway with your shirt. So can you tell us a little bit about the fundraiser that you're doing with the shirts?
Yeah, so I'm making these shirts. It says there's more to my story, hashtag, and I can do mom to an angel, mom to angels, dad to plural, singular, grandparent, aunt, whoever wants to support your angel baby. And all of the proceeds for the shirts are going to be going to the Maryland chapter of the Tears Foundation. And so you can pick your color, you can pick what your hashtag says, and I will make them and get them to you.
Awesome. So we're gonna do a giveaway. So I didn't even think about it, just like last night for last night's book contest, book giveaway. I didn't think about it ahead of time, like how we were gonna do it. So last night, what we did was people had to share the video. They had to say that they wanted to be entered in, and then they had to share the video. And the person with the most shares or the most interactions, I don't remember. I think it was the most interactions. Um, then they got to win a book or a shirt from the author that we had on last night. So what would you like? How would you like us to pick the winner for the giveaway? I'm gonna leave it up to you. Take the pressure off of me. I'm gonna put the pressure on you.
You didn't warn me about this pressure.
Maybe what we can do is we'll just take like a running list and we'll do like a random drawing. So for those people that want to, who have had a pregnancy loss and want to honor their angel babies, if you named your baby, or if you want to just say me, and then we'll do like a random drawing sometime between tonight and tomorrow. Give a few people a chance to watch this, and then we'll do it that way. Does that sound good? Okay. All right. Okay. We'll make it as easy as possible. Okay. I'm like, it's Thursday evening. We don't want to make anything complicated before the weekend. So, okay. So that's what we're going to do. So if you want to honor your babies, or if you want to honor a friend or someone that's another way of being able to support. You can enter them in for winning this shirt. And what we'll do is once we pick the winner, we'll get you connected directly to Sarah to coordinate what that shirt will look like. And I highly encourage, since we are talking about the Maryland chapter of the Tears Foundation, we'll put a link into the comment section for easy access to their Facebook page and the website. And so if you are interested in checking them out, they do have online right now virtual support groups twice a month now, from what I recall. And then starting next year, you're going to be adding a sibling group to that too. So that's pretty cool. I don't know anybody that's doing sibling groups in the area, so that's definitely something very much needed. So so definitely check out the Maryland chapter of the Tears Foundation. And if you want to hear more about other organizations that are local and national, check out Tuesday night's video recap of the panelists from the different organizations that we had on. So yeah, thank you guys so much for sharing your story and just being open and real about all of it, and your adorable pictures. Once we got through the technical glitches, sorry about that. But I am so grateful, and it's been such an honor to be witnessing the journeys for both of you this past year. So thank you so much. And if anybody has questions or they want the panelists to answer anything, go ahead and leave it in the comment section. And if it's towards one of them specifically, I'll make sure to tag them so that they can answer. And you can get connected. Thank you guys so much. And if panelists hold on for just one hot second, I'm going to go ahead and sign us off. So have a good night, everybody.